Hey everyone, welcome to the Atavus Football Show. Another week, lots of new content coming out here. I'm Jake Swilly here with my man Scott Lawyer. Scott, how you doing?
Jake, what's up, man? Excited. Week 3 already. It's going by like a breeze, man. So a lot of stuff to jump into today and kind of some fun topics to kind of unravel at the end. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, no, for sure. We are starting to really breeze through the season. It seems like starting to go really fast. We got a lot of fun topics for you. As you can see, I got my hat on because today, representing my alma mater, we're going to be talking about what it's like to be a college football athlete and go a little more inside of it. What it really means to be day in, day out basis from in season, off season, even in high school, the recruiting process. So I think, as we get into the season, a lot of people who want to know really what it's like to be like, kind of get an inside viewpoint, but then also those high schoolers who are probably getting letters and, at all levels again, not just those elite 5-star recruits, but people like me who were thinking about going low level D1 or D2, D3, what the recruiting process is like and what they kind of should expect, what may be happening as they go through the season right now, leading up to recruiting in the off season. So we'll get into that later. Scott and I have a lot of different stories and perspectives on that we're excited to talk about. But before we get into all that, we're going to, as we always do, go through the highlights and news from the past week. So we'll start there, and we'll start with our Inside the Spotlight segment. We got 2 for you today. Again, our whole goal at Atavus is to improve the game through tackling, make safer and more effective tacklers on a player and program level at all levels of the game. So we really want to highlight a couple of our clients this week who've been doing well this season. And first, we're going to start out with a clip Scott Lawyer is going to go over from our client Park High School out in Minnesota.
Yes, Parks High School, Cottage Grove, Minnesota. You're going to see in this clip, it's going to be a great example of a near foot, near shoulder tackle. But more importantly, we get the forced fumble on here. The biggest questions we always get, Jake knows this, is how do we create more turnovers? And a lot of times it is more of a situational thing that you can work on and tie it into your tackling. But I love it when the tackle itself takes care of the turnover. So here, same foot, same shoulder, right with that right shoulder, getting that ball out and forcing a big turnover close to the goal line. So that was big for them, and happy to see it show up with some good technique.
Absolutely, yeah. No, we love seeing that technique. And again, like you said, we get that question asked all the time. And how do you force more turnovers? And I think that comes down to the punch. First of all, obviously he got his head on the ball on that side, which is again head behind the tackle, behind the player, which is awesome. But that punch also is super effective in getting that ball out. Not just to maintain control and maximize power into the tackle, but force those turnovers, which are huge.
Jay, you remember back in the day when they said, head across would create more forced fumbles because you're putting your head on the ball, bite the ball, as they would say. And I always kind of laugh at it now because of, well, obviously you put anything on the ball with enough force, it's probably going to come out with bad, ball security as a running back, But that was, again, a great example where you're using the near shoulder and it pops the ball out versus using your head. So I love to show those type of clips.
Exactly. No, and you see it in the pros all the time. You see those people taking punches. I think, a couple of the guys in the NFL are notorious for it. But if you really break it down, it's almost what you're doing when you just use the near shoulder and making effective punches. Ultimately, a lot of times you're going to be making a punch that looks like you're punching the ball out too. So, it's almost mimicking that, but along with keeping that effective tackling there as well. Next client I want to talk about is off to a great start down in Texas. We're looking at Dripping Springs High School out of Dripping Springs, Texas. Just had an elite performance so far this year, off to a 3-0 start. You'll see here, these are our benchmarkers that we at Atavus, our key performance indicators that we use to tell how good a program is doing, how good a tackler is doing and whatnot. Tackles made, tackle effectiveness, yak average, and head contact. Tackles made, how efficient are you making the tackle effectiveness, how well you're not only making the tackle but limiting those yards after contact. Yak average, how many yards on average do you give up after contact? And then obviously head contact, self-explanatory. So those benchmarkers, greater than 80%, tackles made, greater than 65% effectiveness, less than 1.8 yards after contact, and 10 yards or 10% head contact, less than that. These are all of our goals and our benchmarkers. And for Dripping Springs this year, again, I think part of the 3-0 start is they have a great defense right now going, great tackling, and they exceed expectations in all of these main main areas with this elite performance. Scott, what do you have to kind of say on this? You've been looking at it a little bit throughout the year during our analysis. So,
yeah, no, like you mentioned, elite at all levels in terms of our KPIs or key performance indicators. For the audience, so you see that 65% tackle effectiveness. A lot of you might look at that and say that's this average, right? But for us, that's where great or elite actually starts, especially at the high school level, 65%. So keep that in mind when you're looking at that, because I know if you're getting a grade on your essay, that would be a below average grade. But that's one thing to keep in mind. But then the YAC average as well. Think about it. The lower you're able to keep that average down, that's really the difference between getting off the field, right, Jake? Because before we first started doing this metric about 4 years ago, we thought that 2.5 to almost 3 yards was okay, or that baseline. But you think about it, right? A couple tackles, you're getting closer and closer to that first down marker. And that's the difference, right, between making the third and long versus third and short potentially. So the YAC average is really critical when it comes to the overall success of your defense and getting off the field, which is so important at all levels that we look at.
Nope, absolutely. So great job to Dripping Springs so far. I think they'll be able to continue the success going down the rest of the year. We'll definitely track it and keep updates with you guys as well as we move forward. All right, moving on to the next level of the game. We're talking about college football. I think another big weekend, especially for my man Scott out here in the Northwest. We're representing here. We're going to get into kind of the recap the games last week. Scott, take us through what we saw. Most teams took care of business, but there were a couple upsets in there as well. One in particular that I'm sure you probably liked very much. So take us away.
Yeah, I mean the top 10, top 7 scores you see there are pretty expected. I know I mentioned last week that I thought the USC game would have been a little bit closer, but USC is legit, not only on offense but also on the defensive end. They're playing really well with Lincoln Riley and his staff over there. But the biggest one, let's just talk about it now. Let's get out the door. Was number 11 right there. We got Washington taking down Michigan State, and I was at the game, and the buzz was just different. Like, it reminded me back when either I was playing with Peterson, but also a little bit after that when I graduated and they were competing at that high level. The stadium was rocking. A lot of the alumni were there having a good time, but more importantly, the team produced on the big stage. Being able to get Michigan State over there to Seattle, and I'll keep in mind their fans travel really well. Like, their fans were there. They were there too, showing and repping. But overall, it was a great game on all phases for Washington offense. Penix was out there slanging it, throwing some back shoulder throws on the run. Also, you had a great defensive showing, being able to apply some pressure and stop the run and get them in third and long and stuff where they're not as comfortable. And then on special teams as well, laying some big hits that really got the crowd going. So super excited for them and what Coach DeBoer is doing over there. And I'm excited to see what the rest of the season looks like for my Huskies. And then everything else from the end was pretty expected. I do like that Florida kind of bounced back. You got Texas A&M bouncing back after that tough loss a couple weeks ago. But overall, nothing too crazy on the college front. But that can't be said about the NFL level, which we'll get into.
Yeah. No, like you said, I agree. Nothing too crazy. Those losses, again, you got BYU losing, who got 12, and Miami losing 13. But again, they played Oregon, who was ranked. They played, in Miami playing Texas A&M, who was ranked. So really could have gone either way. Not like a major upset like we had last week. And then obviously UW coming up big, and now we'll get into in a little bit coming into the top 25 this week. I'm sure they would have liked to close the game out a little bit stronger. Kind of from what we saw, they were up, 39-14, or had about a 2.5, 3-score lead, but little up at the end. But obviously putting 39 points up on that Michigan State team and the way they did was impressive. So big things hopefully coming through the next couple weeks, especially with a couple traditionally big tests throughout the Pac-12 that they have. So we'll see what they can do. Getting into our top 25 for this week. That top 10 stays relatively about the same. Not a lot of huge shakeups there. Again, I think there's a couple teams that move up a little bit, but not as much of a shakeup as we had in the past couple weeks where, we had a couple teams of weeks 1 and 2 and 3 jumping up like 10 spots. We don't really have that this week. The biggest jump is obviously probably Washington now jumping into the top 25. A couple teams fall like Miami and whatnot. But I think overall this is kind of what we expected. The only other big jump was maybe Penn State going from 22 to 14. They've been climbing the ranks over the last 2 weeks as well, looking very impressive. But not a huge, not really unexpected what we see here going into this week. Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, I would just kind of echo that. I think Arkansas will probably, they're pretty competitive. They're well coached. I think they could probably jump up a couple spots in the next few weeks. Utah always got to, look out for them. Willingham is a great coach as well. They have a good quarterback. They've been there. They play physical. But honestly, I would expect UW to also climb up with their matchup against Stanford, who historically they played them pretty well, but they're in Seattle for the fourth time in a row. And I'm sorry, Kerry Carter, but I think we got your number this year. So we'll see how that goes. But all in all, I think it's going to shake up for a really good weekend of college football.
Yep, no, absolutely. Let's get into a little bit of the news this week. A couple things. We got Herm Edwards out at Arizona State. Almost like there was a video possibly he got let go. That's not confirmed, but let go right after the game on the field. We don't know what was said. Maybe they were just talking about we're going to have a meeting later. But ultimately, out at Arizona State, had a couple years there. Just wasn't able to really get the program back around again, especially in a Pac-12 Power 5 conference. So we'll see where he lands, or if this is kind of the end for him. He's been coaching a long time, but we'll see what happens from here.
Yeah.
Also, we got released this week, and I don't really think it's much of a surprise, but people are making a little big deal out of it. It came out that there was $280,000 spent on the recruiting weekend that brought in Archer Manning and a couple other recruits. I've never been a big, we'll get into a little bit. I was never a big-time D1 recruit on these big trips, obviously. But I got to think, and I know Texas probably has a lot more money than even some programs on the average, but I got to think that this amount of money for a high recruit isn't like too absurd. Arch Manning's the one in the news all the time over the last year, so I'm sure that's why it made the news more than others. But Scott, have you ever heard anything like this much money being spent on one recruiting weekend to bring these guys in?
Going back to my days at UW, we had some pretty high-profile names. Obviously, without the NIL deal, that wasn't in place at the time. But I would definitely can imagine how, with the budget over at Texas, how they could get some pretty good little weekend going for those young kids, and being able to show them that they could potentially be household big names in that campus. Was a lot of kids, they won't say that, but they like the ability to be kind of wined and dined and stuff. And don't get me wrong, we had some good experiences back at UW when it comes to recruiting trips. I was a guy that often hosted the younger guys coming in, so I know the kind of money that goes into it and the experience they're looking for. But yeah, that's what to expect at UT with that staff and also the budget they have.
Yep. No, it's definitely eye-popping at first to the average person probably, but your experience, I don't think it's totally, out of the woodwork for this. Right. Last thing I kind of wanted to point out, I think it's kind of a fun one is you look at these four schools right now, and my first thought anyways is basketball, right? You got UNC, right, UK, KU, and Duke, all historically the best programs in college basketball history, or one, some of them. Right. This year in football, however, all four of these schools are now undefeated. The biggest, all four undefeated right now. UK being a top 10 team, surprisingly enough, and then obviously Kansas over the last 2 years has really struggled in football, and now have come, started their season undefeated, heading into conference play. So just a fun little kind of fact to point out. That's maybe these programs are starting to catch a little bit, and maybe it won't be thought just as basketball programs moving forward. Maybe get back on that football thing as well. So a lot of good players coming out of here. Just something unique to kind of hit on as we really get into conference play over the next few weeks. So, right. All right, let's transition now to the NFL. We're going to go inside the league real quick. Kind of start recapping what last weekend looked like. I think there was still another wild weekend. A lot of teams you thought might bounce back and didn't quite. Some did. a great game that last Thursday night. Chargers Chiefs, Dolphins just exploding on the Ravens' high-scoring offense with Tua, Waddle, and Tyreek. Surprising Jags and Colts. Obviously, no one probably expected that. Colts having a rough start. Lions getting a win, scoring 35 points once again. Titans still struggling, surprisingly enough. Bengals still struggling a little bit. We'll hit on it here in a second, but Broncos as well. Russ has caught a lot of slack over the last 2 weeks for his lack of performance. I'm not going to say much. We've talked about internally where, I thought Russ was lately, and he's not that top tier quarterback, but let others debate that. And then lastly, we can talk about in a second after you give us your rundown of the week, but your Niners got my Seahawks this week, so I'm not going to say I didn't see it coming. I just would have wished we would put up a little better fight. But what do you take from this week?
I think you called it in episode 1. It's going to be much more. You're hoping for a more competitive year overall, and that's what we're seeing. I mean, guys like the Jets coming back within 2 minutes. Shout out to Sean Hopper, the big Jets fan. But yeah, it came back with 2 minutes left, down 2 possessions, something crazy.
Yep.
Joe Flacco was doing it. Jaguars, who expected that, right? Blowout, shutout win versus the Colts with Matt Ryan. Giants are super competitive, beating the Panthers. Who else? I mean, the Niners we'll talk more about, but that was a great game on defense. It came with the cost with losing Trey Lance, so we'll get into that.
Cardinals come back from 23-0, right?
Right, yeah. Texans were kind of giving the Broncos a run for the money. Russ wasn't really cooking over there in Denver. And then, I think the Monday night was the icing on the cake when you had the Bills putting up 40 with Stephon Diggs, who I think you have on fantasy that went for 40, 50 points or something crazy. Yep. And then the Vikings versus the Eagles. I mean, the Eagles with Sirianni over there. They invested a bunch throughout free agency and trades this offseason, and it's showing that they're a whole different team. With Jalen Hurts back there, the running game is dynamic, but also you add a threat like A.J. Brown, along with a defense that is playing really good. With Slay out there was killing it, locking up Justin Jefferson, really on one-on-one, just taking him, following him across the field. That was a great week of football when it came to NFL.
Yeah, no, definitely unexpected. A lot of comebacks, a lot of teams being competitive like we were kind of hoping for. As we start getting into it, we're going to talk about this in a couple weeks. We're calling it the NFL's the regular season's preseason, that first month where because teams don't play their starters and play their stars in the preseason, there's this lack of maybe chemistry or just lack of experience, or trying to get their feet for the first couple weeks, figure out who they are, because they don't have those games to rely on the preseason because they want to keep their guys healthy. Exactly. We'll cover this in a few weeks, but I think you're kind of seeing a little bit of that. Teams either catching teams off guard, trying to catch up and catch their own footing, kind of figure out who they are as a team. But again, that's going to take a few weeks, and so we'll reevaluate this in a couple weeks. But I think it's a little bit what you see going on, a little unexpected play, sloppy play, and then some teams kind of surprising you. So, I expect this kind of weekend for the most part, at least for the next couple weeks. Maybe teams will start to see teams separate themselves and teams fall back into their normal predicted spots when we get midway through the year. But I do like what I'm seeing, this competitiveness so far this year. All right, moving into some NFL news, starting off with injury news. Obviously, the big one, unfortunately for you, Scott, is Trey Lance. Looking like a good start. He's out for the season with that ankle injury. But other ones to note on is Justin Herbert with ribs, questionable right now. We'll see if he's able to tough it out and make it to the weekend. James Conner with an ankle, Devin Duvernay, concussion, Jerry Jeudy and Pat Surtain for the Broncos, both with shoulders injuries. That could be crucial. Dalton Schultz, the receiving tight end for the Cowboys, that's not helping them. They might get Gallup back this week. But if not, then they really only have Amari Cooper, which, they need as many weapons they can get right now. And then the big one Monday night, Dane Jackson from Buffalo with that awful, what appeared to be neck injury. But thankfully he, got cleared. Everything looks okay. No major injuries. after going to the hospital and whatnot. So great to see there. But Scott, talk us, your thoughts on Trey Lance. Obviously, that hurts you guys. But it's like, I guess they kept Jimmy, right?
Yeah. I mean, we could be much worse off in terms of where we're at now with the backup quarterback. So very grateful for that. But yeah, obviously you don't want to see a guy like that go down that you invested so much in, and a lot of speculation on the play calling and how they were utilizing him. Not only this past game, but all of his starts that he's played in. I think that obviously we know that Trey can run, and that's what he brings to the 49er in the Kyle Shanahan system. But this more situationally, I don't think that it was necessary in terms of, well, we were running the ball pretty handily in the first couple of drives against you guys with our running backs, and Debo had a big 50-yard gain. Where I just don't think it was necessary to run him. It was 2nd and 8 right against the big up. Not a nickel defense, not a dime. It was their base defense. It looked like, and you run them right into those dudes up the middle. And unfortunate that injuries could happen, on any given play. But you hate to see in this point in the season for that guy, but he'll definitely bounce back, and I'm glad we have Jimmy to help kind of keep our playoff and Super Bowl hopes alive, hopefully. But I don't like to see that. And Justin Herbert took a big shot to the ribs, but he gutted it out the whole game. We'll see how he goes, but quarterback is really important to have that flexibility and the mobility to do it. I think James Conner will be fine, but the big ones are obviously Jared Jeudy and Surtain. Those are shoulder injuries for positions those are kind of important. And then, great to see Dane Jackson is doing well after that friendly fire hit. But overall, lot to report on the injury news because it's such a physical game. But a lot of these guys are going to be able to bounce back from this, hopefully.
Yep, no, I think so. I think, again, they're questionable for now, but by the time game comes Sunday, hopefully a lot of these guys can make it back. Other news in the league, one of the big ones over the weekend, Mike Evans getting into that fight with Lattimore. He comes out afterwards. The lip reading you can see is, Lattimore and the Saints get into a scuffle with Brady almost. He comes out to what I believe he believes is defending him and saying, "That's Tom Brady. Well, what do you expect me to do?" Comes out of nowhere, takes a shot at Lattimore. Now the result of that is suspended 1 game. That was upheld after his appeal. But I can see this coming. I think it was going to come either way, the suspension. I'm not sure if you need to. Again, they've had. I guess there's a little bit of history between Lattimore and him over the years, being in the division, lots of scuffles over the years. So,
right.
Not totally unexpected. But what do you think about this?
Yeah, no, they have a lot of bad blood between each other, and that's football. You're gonna have your you won't like to see it come off the sideline and do that, push him while he's not looking, but there is a heated moment. Like you said, he's trying to defend his quarterback. That it was a tight game for a little bit, so I get it. Emotions are high. Hate to see him, but luckily it's only 1 week, and hopefully he bounces back and be able to help that offense that definitely needs him.
Yeah, no, you definitely don't. You don't. From doing that in terms of why he did it. Okay, maybe you can see it, bad blood and stuff. Just maybe not, like you said, coming off the sidelines. Maybe just getting in his face, and at the worst, it's a shoving match. But nonetheless, 1 game suspension upheld because of that. In the news a little bit, lots of signings, obviously, but this one's a little more notable, especially with the Bucs right now, is they signed Cole Beasley last week, the other week to the practice squad. I believe he's elevated now to the active roster. With Evans out, with Godwin possibly still out, with, heck, Julio could still be out, Gage, if he's able to return yet or not. A lot of questions at the wide receiver position for them. Obviously, if everyone's on the field at once, they're loaded. But that's not the case lately. There's a lot of questions at that playmaking position. And them also losing Gio in the backfield, going on IR, at least for a little while. So bringing in a veteran guy, play that slot role, dynamic guy, Cole Beasley. So we'll see if he's able to add enough juice to the offense and support him until their guys can get back. Do you think he can make an impact right away for them, given all the injuries? Or
just based on sheer numbers, he definitely could, because who else are they going to throw the ball to besides Fournette and maybe a few of the tight ends they have. But yeah, Beasley is definitely a safety blanket for Tom. I think they'll be able to find some chemistry pretty quick because, Brady has familiarity with guys in the slot that are more shifty and can create room just by being savvy off the line. So, yeah, I think he's definitely going to thrive. But with anything, it's going to take time to build that chemistry. But you could imagine when they get Godwin back, Julio, and Evans, that's going to be a pretty stacked receiving core. So kind of got to look to the future with that. But immediately, I do believe he does help Brady and the issues they have.
Yep. No, a veteran presence who's able to adapt quickly and make up for lost time for sure. On the defensive side, Joe Hayden announced this week he's retiring, signing that one-day contract and retiring as a Browns. He split time between there and the Steelers. I forgot how long of a career he actually had. I think he's a little underappreciated. I think he's an elite corner, especially for the amount of time he played. And so finally retiring after around 10 plus years or so. Yeah, Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the top tier corners. I remember him back in Florida, back in those days when we were playing for championships. And he was just a dog. He's elite, man. Definitely underrated and underappreciated, but hopefully now they kind of get to see with his longevity along with his productivity. He was one of those top guys that definitely we can look back as one of the better ones in the last 10 years.
Yep, absolutely. Last bit of news here, the Hall of Fame nominees, all that who are eligible were the 100-plus nominees list was released this week, along with obviously the most notable that every year is the first-year eligible players. I think we can turn this into an episode in itself down the line as we get further throughout the season, further in the process of the Hall of Fame selection. But here the notable first years, you've got Chris Johnson, Cam Chancellor, Darrelle Revis, Navarro Bowman, Dwight Freeney, James Harrison, Jari Evans, and Joe Thomas. A lot of notable guys here made a big impact on the game.
Right.
We won't spend too much time on it. Like I said, we can probably talk about this all day. I think pretty much all, or at least not most, are deserving at the Hall at some point. But any of these guys in particular that you think will actually have a legitimate shot as a first year, that will get in their first year eligibility.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously Harrison, Freeney, and then I would say honestly, then Joe, the big tackle from Cleveland. I think those three off the top of my head, they definitely deserve it. But with my bias again, Bowman could definitely be in there. But you look at rings, but also longevity, and I think that's where the other guys have a little bit of a increase on him or a bump on a slight edge on Bowman, and even Cam, although he does have a ring. He did have a shorter career like my guy Bowman, but all these guys are great candidates. I think they'll definitely get in some point in the near future.
Yeah, no, I think I agree for the most part. I think Joe and Freeney are locked for year one, possibly Harrison as well. I think guys like Jari Evans, Darrelle Revis are probably year 2 or 3. Right. Cam and Bowman a few more years down the line probably. Chris Johnson, though, I know he has that 2,000-yard year, but again, in terms of his peak and the height of his career was, I think, shorter lived compared to others at his position. And although he was good for those years, kind of a shortened career. I don't know if he might late, in his eligibility maybe gets in. But who knows? Maybe that 2,000-yard year really kind of holds him up and gets him in earlier than expected. But a lot of great players. We'll dive into this probably later in the season as more of this news around this comes up. Looking forward to this coming weekend. More notable games again. I think it's going to be action packed as we move forward. I think the ones I'm looking forward to the most. We got Bills, Dolphins. Bills are obviously on a roll, but Dolphins, maybe they surprise some people. At least they put up a really competitive game with the Bills. Lions and Vikings, I think, should still be interesting. Let's see who else we got. We've got Eagles, Commanders. NFC East matchup. Say that again.
Packers and the Bucks.
Yep, absolutely. The other one we got is going to be our game of the week, which is Jets and Bengals. The main thing I want to look at here is, I'm looking forward to, is hopefully the Bengals offense can get more in a roll. Jamar Chase gets back to himself as they hopefully O-line gives Joe enough time to get the ball out. But you've got Ahmad Gardner, a top 5 pick in this year's draft, going up against Jamar Chase probably for the week or the afternoon. So I'm looking to see how that plays out. We'll be able to break down that analysis later on as well. But yeah, I think overall scope of game this weekend, Giants, Cowboys, Jags, I wouldn't have said this before, but Jags, Chargers now I think is even a notable game to kind of see, especially given the Herbert injury. So
Sure.
another full slate of games, but you guys got the Broncos this week. You guys got a great shot. I'd probably even give you the favorite at this point with the Judy Surtain injuries and the way that the Broncos offense is kind of in dysfunction right now and Russ not at peak performance. I think you guys, I'd probably favor you guys so far in this matchup.
Yeah, for sure. I think prime time. I mean, that defense, I love what the Niners defense is doing. You can win a lot of games with that because they have so many threats. I think Tufunga from USC, that dude, I don't know if you've seen him play, Jake, but number 29 back there.
Yep.
I remember him at USC. He was just a baller, man. That's what he's doing now in his second year. He's flying around that box safety role, but also he's doing really well in coverage. So I like him. And you got your guy Ward on the outside, long, lengthy, got an interception last week. And you got that front seven. That's one of the best, if not the best, unbiasedly in the NFL, just given the depth, but also the guys that the names you have on all two of those levels are just, some real dudes. So yeah, I'm excited. Hopefully the weather's good. Last couple of weeks have been a little bit shaky, but if we get some good weather, maybe we can air the ball out, get Ayuk and Debo going more vertically. I think Kittle might return as well. So should be a good matchup for my Niners.
Yep, no, looking forward to it. On our end, we got the Falcons this week. Seahawks do, and two of probably the weaker teams in the NFL. I'm actually a little worried. Our offense isn't looking great. Our defense is still giving up yards on the ground. That middle of the field still kind of an area of concern as it always been. So, and the Falcons right now, I mean, they're competitive. The first 2 weeks, competitive against the Saints, competitive against the Rams, and although they lost both games, they were close. And they could scare you a little bit. So, I think we have a shot to win. I think we should win this game as long as we can just play efficiently like we did in week 1. But I think we still got to shore up a few things to still be that consistently competitive team across the board. So we'll see. Hopefully get some more players back. But yeah, hope, cross my fingers going forward for this weekend. I'll be at the game. So I'll give a firsthand, experience and feedback next week as we get back on the show.
Nice.
All right. So now, we really want to get into our main topic. And so, like we said, inside the life of a college football player. We'll have Scott start. We have different stories. Scott playing at UW, D1, obviously, playing in the Pac-12. Me and myself actually transferring around here in the Northwest, a couple schools playing D2, playing D3. Kind of just going through our what in season and off season looks like at all these levels, what the recruiting process was like in high school, and whatnot. And so we're also going to bring in right now, kind of to touch on, he can interject himself in our conversations, and also at the end get a little more into what he does. But we have our Director of Partnership Development here at Atavus, Scott Laigo, out here on the West Coast for us. Not only is he our Director of Partnership Development out here, but he also has been working hard on with his organization, Studen Athlete Advocates, out here on the West Coast and Seattle area specifically, helping kids with the recruiting process, with the academic process, making sure they get right information, walking them along. Because there's a lot of steps in that process to make sure you get right. We'll talk about that kind of at the end as we wrap up, and he'll give his input, but also interject as we go. But Scott, how you doing? Guess what's your background with all this? You obviously have a little different background as well. Coaching at the highest level, and being involved in this game as long as you have.
Yeah, I basically my career has been in high school football. I used to be the head football coach at Garfield High School. Coached at my alma mater, O'Day. Coached for the UW way before Scott even thought about playing. Maybe Scott might have been born when I was coaching. So many years ago, but just saw when I was at Garfield the huge need to help out kids through the process, because People don't know this, but the average is 478 to 1 ratio when it comes to counselors to students.
Wow.
So your chance of seeing your counselor are pretty limited. So if you don't have a good coach and you don't have a good situation around you, then you can get lost in the process.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's a huge piece that I think we'll touch on. At least that's through my experience, and maybe Scott, lawyer yourself. Again, we'll call Scott lawyer Scotty here for this segment since we got two Scotts on here. But yeah, so as we go through this, Scott, I'll have you, Scotty, I'll have you start. But Scott, as you listen to this, please, give us kind of your perspective too, based on our experiences and what we kind of went through and what you saw. So, Scott, if you take us away, obviously playing the UW, I'll let you go from here, your background and how you started and whatnot.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Jake. Scott, good to see you. The better looking Scott of the group. But yeah, we got, quick on, I don't want to spend too much time on my story. I can go on for hours on this, but real quick on my high school experience. I'm actually from San Jose, California, Oak Grove High School, which is historically one of the better schools in the San Jose area. But I would be lying if I was saying I was the best athlete to be on that team or in that program over the last 10 years at that time. I mean, I had a lot of great players that I went through high school with, but like Scott and what he's seen, the academic side of it and also this life off the football field, there's different challenges and struggles and adversity that kids are going through at the high school level. I was very fortunate to be one of the first players to earn a D1 scholarship in years at school. Like I said, I wasn't the most talented, but I was fortunate enough to take care of my grades and do things off the field enough to put myself in that position. I'm very grateful for. But really, I was just playing. I mean, I knew of the recruiting process because my brother, he played at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and he earned a scholarship there. So I kind of knew about the process. But at the same time, I was just a young 16, 15-year-old guy playing on varsity, trying to make a name for myself and separate my name from my brother, who had a great career at my high school. Ended up playing really good on the varsity level as a sophomore and as a junior, where I had 10+ sacks, 90 tackles. I was playing receiver as well, where I started getting more interest from the college level. My first real offer, though, was from UW. And one thing that I wish I would have done is actually take all my visits. And if I would give any advice to young athletes out there, is take all. I don't know how many they have now. I think it's 5+.
Is it 5 still? Yeah, I think it's like 5, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Take all your trips and really find out what makes the most sense for you and your family. But with that being said, I think UW by far was my best opportunity in terms of life after football. And that's why I'm very grateful to be here with Atavus, because I feel like it was just through connections and being in Seattle that I was able to work with Atavus. Real quickly on my college careers, I was very fortunate to play for 2 coaches. Obviously, my first 3 years there, I was with Coach Peterson. And then my last 2 as a redshirt, I played under Coach Peterson. A lot of different perspectives I can go into both these experiences. All I would tell you is that it is tough. It is challenging. There's going to be adverse moments where you have to kind of just, look at yourself deep in the mirror and say, hey, do I want to be here? Do I want to do this? And for me, I was very fortunate to have a great support system, not only at home, but within my team that made me, be able to fight through those tough days. And I ended up winning the Don James Award winner for adversity and perseverance throughout my career. Very fortunate to have that accolade, as Don James was a standard in the Pac-12 and this in history in terms of football, college football. Great coach, and Scott knows this. So I was very fortunate to have that award. And at the end of the day, had great experiences at UW, met a lot of great people, and had a good career as well as mainly a special teams player, but also I started a few games, played behind guys like Shaq Thompson, John T. Mood, Travis Feeney, a lot of good linebackers, so Court Dennison as well. So I learned from those guys and also built some really great relationships that I'm very fortunate for.
Yeah, for sure. Tell us a little bit real quick about I think everyone's interested in this. They want to know what a day-to-day life is like, when you're a college football player. So first, what does in season look like? From morning to night, obviously it's packed with stuff for sure. But then what's off season like when you're training and still having to go to school and whatnot?
Yeah, so let's just start with the in season. In season is a little bit more low key in terms of wake up times. They'll kind of be more centered around practice versus workouts. So you will be able to get your sleep. And when I mean sleep, 6 a.m. versus 5 or 4:30 a.m. is your wake up call. But yeah, definitely cannot be late to that first meeting because depending on the coach, you could actually be home back to your home state if you're late more than once or even one time, depending on who the coach is. And I've seen it happen. So yeah, being on time is the biggest thing, almost your biggest fear, I would say. But it teaches you a lot. It teaches you a lot of good, values that carry on outside of after football. But yeah, usually you'll start with the special teams meeting early in the morning. That's usually the first meeting you'll have, and then you'll transition. You'll break off into offense, defense around 7:30, and then you're getting taped. You're getting on the practice field around 10. My first year at UW, we actually practiced in the evening, which was a little bit different because you would be practicing after classes, so around 4, and you get out around 7, which kind of prolonged your day in a sense. I actually like the earlier practice because once you're done with school, you're kind of done for the day, along with like virtual meetings or kind of in the meeting, you're kind of done by like 3 p.m., which was great. But yeah, during the season, you're typically having your main practices are going to be on Tuesday and Wednesday, where you call, your lunch pail hard hat days where you're getting all that work in. But usually Monday and Sunday are more of like easy walkthroughs, kind of debriefing of the game. Monday is more of your install, but still a lighter practice. And then Thursday is just our favorite day because it's a walkthrough. It's easy on your body. Usually you're in shells or just, jerseys and little pads. So that was cool. And then Friday you're traveling or getting ready for the game. But still at D1 school, you actually go to the hotel. Even on home games, you go to the hotel on Friday night just to kind of eliminate distractions and all that. But yeah, overall you eat the same food. Scott has talked about this before, but coaches and football players are very superstitious. So wherever you're traveling, it could be Eugene, Oregon, Corvallis, it could be in Stanford, Palo Alto, Seattle. You're eating the same menu, Jake and Scott. Like you guys know the steak and potatoes. Your catering is going to be a fried chicken place, or now it's probably a little bit healthier. But we always had Ezell's on Friday on the bus. But yeah, we're just guys of we're ritual guys. We have to keep our same ritual. So a lot of funny stories I can share on that. And then the off season is basically just more centered around workouts. So a lot earlier wake up times, probably 4:30, 5 a.m. Get your workout done, and then you're pretty much done for the whole day because after that you're just you're worrying about class and maybe study hall. But yeah, off season is a little bit more low key, but more of an emphasis on training and getting you ramped up. Either you're losing weight, putting on muscle. It varies against amongst athletes, but overall there are pretty contrasting things.
No, yeah, I think you can see that across the board when I get into, to my experience as well. But obviously, I think you have a little more packed in-season schedule than I did. What is it like balancing class? Because I think we all know the stigma around any D1 sport, especially like basketball and football, is D1 athletes don't have to go to class. That whole stigma. And I think maybe for select programs or athletes, it's true to an extent, but from what I hear, in the most part, you still got to go to class and balance all that stuff. How was it like balancing that? What are your workload like academically?
Yeah, honestly, it varies from some coaches emphasize it more than the others, but at the end of the day, it still is very much you have to show up to wherever you're obligated to be at. So they would always have class checkers as well, designated class checkers that would be in there. And the worst thing you could be is not there with one of those guys in the room, because that's going to be a long day the next morning for you in terms of conditioning, some type of conditioning, or running the stadium for hours. It's going to be something crazy. But yeah, I would say personally, even for myself, I was always pretty academically driven and pretty motivated to do well in the classroom. Didn't have that issue, but I was very fortunate to have Coach Peterson, who really put an emphasis on that. The whole built for life motto was really did show up in all phases, not only in football, but after, with your family life and also academics. So my experience with that, with Peterson particularly, was that I really started to really apply myself in the classroom. I was able to be on the dean's list a couple times throughout my career at UW, which was, I really, hold that dear to my heart as such a great school, and being able to get on that list. And also just setting myself up for success after football with the connections and being able to network with Peterson and his staff. That was big for me, and I would definitely never take that for granted.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's a great insight, especially at that level. And from everything I hear, and you guys can probably speak better to it than I can with your experiences at that level, but being in a program for Peterson seems like it's different than other programs for sure. I think he holds a lot of things in high regard and sets a priority, like you said, for academics and things that maybe others don't. Scott Laigo, is that kind of what you see as well with a program like? Because I think UW at that time was, they were the echelon, not only academic, not only like on the field, but just as a program as a whole. I think he's held to high regard. So
absolutely. Well, Scotty did two things that I never did: the dean's list, and as a GA, you'll never make the dean's list because you were never thought you were going to go to class. For one. Number two, Scotty got his L's. We only had lasagna, peas, apple pie, and a glass of milk.
Man.
Not man. Really good stuff. And trust, as you go to different places, everybody makes their lasagna a little bit different. So it was never. Right. So having said that, Jake, you're absolutely right. Kids are, it's so much different from when I was coaching. What the model that Scott's talking about is the one that is good, that we do practice now in the morning. We let the kids go to class and they're pretty much done. Those long days, man, we used to have practice at 2:58, to be honest with Coach James. And it was 3 o'clock when I coached Lambright, but 2:58. And we didn't get out of there till, the kids didn't get out of there till 7:30, 8 o'clock every night. And makes for long days. So I like the new model, what they're doing. I think it applies to what the real world is. Like, get your work done, have it done, and then move on for the day. So, very much what Scott said is the truth to how the model is being done now. And I think it's good for these kids. But kind of going back to what Scotty said, I think one of the biggest things is to take 5 trips. I think the other thing is that I always say to the kids when I talk to no matter girl or boy, that what you really have to think about is if your sport leaves you or you leave your sport, whatever happens, some things happen in your career, can you see yourself on this campus getting a degree that you want to get it in? And I think that's a question that a lot of kids don't ask themselves. They only get caught in the limelight of the sport they're going to play for and having fun and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, you are there to get your degree and get your education and do the things that you can and make a chance. And as I like to say, don't let the sport use you. You use the sport as well. Make sure you get your degree and your education. And a lot of times these kids are doing some great things. I mean, a lot of guys, like Scotty was on the dean's list. I mean, get your education early. And if you maybe stay for your 5th year now with this COVID thing, 6 years, you get your master's degree paid for. So take advantage of it. It's a huge, changes in the landscape of what we're dealing with in college athletics.
Right.
Yeah, no, 100%. Especially that last point of, be somewhere where you want to be, and that if athletics is taken away from you, is this where you want to be? Is this the education? Is this the degree you want to get? And can you see yourself there? I think, especially for me too, because with my story, that hits hard, because I kind of the opposite of Scott. I transferred around quite. I'm not gonna lie. I wasn't D1, so there wasn't like that transfer portal or anything, which it's a whole another discussion. I think it gets blown out of the water at times. But kind of I'll get into my story a little bit. But that transferring thing is almost in my blood in a sense. I transferred coming from middle school, transferring districts in high school to play for my dad in high school, where he was a teacher at a school. They offered him the job. He finally took it, and I decided, okay, I want to go play for him and gain that. Just have that experience of playing for your dad. Which, first off, if anybody has that opportunity, if your dad or a parent is a coach in any capacity at a school or level, I go play. It's an awesome experience. Be able to have that looking back on things. It was fortunate enough that my dad being a football coach for 30 years at the high school level. Me playing football as my primary sport, it just worked out. But me starting like as Scott did with the recruiting process, I was fortunate enough to, again, because I said that I had my dad as my coach. Obviously my biggest advocate as my dad, but as a coach as well. Being able to talk to recruiting coordinators and coaches that come in. Him himself playing in college, going through the recruiting process was a huge help as well. Kind of knowing the ins and outs. And so I was fortunate enough to have him almost as my counselor, as well as Scott. You kind of mentioned that there's a lot of kids that don't have that resource right now, or an efficient or effective resource to go to through this process. And so, I was, I think the biggest thing, I think the biggest thing for me in the recruiting process, I got letters from, I wasn't recruited big time at D1. I think part of that comes down to not what I did on the field. I was, all area, all state, set school records, all that kind of stuff, you name it. But I think another thing that people overlook is, sometimes there are like those tangibles that, your size, your height and weight, how you look on film and stuff. And even though I produced numbers and produced well in the field, I knew people who did, half of what I did in the field that were getting D1 scholarships, myself. And there's other things like, maybe I was told that I could have played at certain schools, but at that year, they didn't need my position. Kind of like the NFL, they're not going to bring in free agents that they don't need that position. If you have a star running back, you're not going to bring in another high profile, running back because you already have it. And so I think there's a lot of the factors that, people shouldn't get discouraged. It's not necessarily, if you don't get those offers or the looks at the highest level, it's not necessarily saying that you can't play at that level. I think there's just, there's a lot of factors that go into it that people don't realize. So, don't get discouraged as an athlete. There's still a lot of opportunities out there. D1's not the only thing. And, especially for myself, I had opportunities to walk on, but, I think the biggest advice I can give to athletes at the high school level going through this, and Scott, one of them is what you mentioned: go somewhere where you want to be, where you can see yourself gaining an education. That's huge. If athletics is taken away from you, it's one of the reasons why I actually transferred a couple of times in college, to make sure I was at the right fit educationally and getting the things that I wanted along with playing sports. But, I think really take a look and what do you want? My advice is, what do you want to get out of the college experience in football, in playing? And for some people that's trying to play at the highest level, maybe that's sacrificing not playing all the games you can, or only playing special, whatever it may be, just because it's a numbers game and it's the highest level. So a lot of competitive people. The other part of that is, with me was, okay, I could have played at, D1, 1AA, stuff like that. Montana had Ivy League offers, but I wanted to try and just play as many games as I could. I wanted to make sure I stayed out here in the West Coast so my parents could see me play on the weekends. That was a huge deal for me. And so once I started kind of setting these parameters, it started narrowing down my list already. A lot of great Montana schools out there, but I want to go out to Montana. It's hard for my family to make that trip every weekend to see me play if I were to do that. And so I think, whatever your goals may be, and setting those parameters, I think, is key to making that decision process easier as you walk through it versus, you get lots of letters. You'll get lots of letters from schools from all over the country in there. But if you kind of have parameters set and what you think you want to do, it makes the decision-making process a little easier, and you can narrow down your search. And that's kind of where I ended up. Ended up with a handful of schools that I was looking at seriously here in the Northwest. First year, ended up going to Central Washington, redshirted there, got a partial scholarship, which, I don't think people also realize that D1 has a lot of money. Yes. So full rides, things like that. When you get below that, with each level going down, the schools allowed less and less scholarships to offer. And that's if they have the money. So Central, for example, could offer 35 full rides if they wanted to, full tuition. But they didn't have the money for that. So a lot of the players, they split up the scholarships around partials or halves or thirds, which is what the boat I fell into. So that's just something to consider and realize as well. From there, after the year, just wasn't the right fit. Went to Willamette University, which is a D3 down in Salem, Oregon. Was one of the other schools I really liked coming out of college. And again, I thought had, kind of the connections and what I wanted to do educationally and career wise with, being close to Nike and sports marketing was a big thing and stuff like that. Played a couple years there and then realized towards the end, ended up transferring to George Fox my last year of football, last year and a half in school, because I had that 5th year of eligibility left. And I was actually fortunate enough. My sister was actually going there a year before I did. She was 3 years younger than me. She was a head athlete in track and field there. And when she went there for her orientation, her first year there, I was blown away with the resources just academically that they had. They had way more than what I had at my school. And I was actually jealous. I was like, oh, dang, I wish I could have gone here. They had lots of sports marketing focus, lots of internship opportunities and things like that. And like Scott, like you were saying, like football is obviously going to be number one. It's huge, but getting that degree is really the main focus and big focus here for long term. And so along with, there's some adversity and difficulty in football those first few years. Went to George Fox where sports and football was a huge focus, more than previous spots I'd been to. But also the real thing was, okay, even if football doesn't work out for my last year and a half, I'm going to get the education, the career opportunities to set myself up in the future. So that's ultimately why I made my last transfer there. And the reason, there's no transfer portals that, really like D2 or D3 or anything like that. Especially D3. It's a little, so level of play, honestly, same as D2. I had a lot of guys that could even play D1 on my team. But just like I said, didn't have the opportunities, or, in general, like linemen are typically smaller than your D2s and D1s and stuff like that. But the level of play is still really high. The college football life is still very intense. Probably not exactly as to Scott, what you had, obviously, but it's still a big commitment of time and effort and everything. But yeah, so I'll kind of get into then what life is like at these lower levels. But D3 can kind of be its own thing at times. You don't get any the big one. You don't get any athletic scholarships. Everything's academic focused, which I don't know if people always realize at first. So that's kind of a big one. But then also transferring is a little interesting. Typically when you transfer at the higher levels, you have to tell your program the first time you do it that you're looking into this, you want to talk with other programs. And then typically if you transfer laterally or up, you got to sit out a year. D3, that's, as I found out, that is not the case. You can transfer as many times as you want from D3 to D3 and still be eligible. And your first time that you want to talk to another school, you don't have to tell your program. It's found that out too. It's interesting. I'll kind of go in season, off season, like Scotty did, but at the kind of the lower level, D2, D3 levels. So in season, it's actually that what you guys are saying, that old traditional model, especially with us, because they make academics a huge focus, especially at D3. And a lot of times, if you have a class or you have to take a test and be late to practice or a meeting, that's actually acceptable from time to time. Not all the time. They still want you to structure your classes as much as you can around those times. But typically, the first half of your day is dedicated to classes. Around that 1 to 2 o'clock windows, when those first team meetings are, you show up for those. Try and hit the training room before that. Get prepped for practice. Special teams or team meeting, then go into positional. After that, from there, it's roughly like a 3 o'clock practice. There till about 5 or 3:30 to 5:30, whatever it is. After practice, you finish up. Getting ready. If you have a class that night, you'll go. My first year at Willamette, I had went from like a 6 o'clock practice ending, went to class for an hour, came back for night meetings. And so that's another common theme, is we have night meetings going until, roughly 8 or 9 o'clock, going to bed and having to get up for class the next day. The one difference between what I saw is like D2, D3, when I was at Central, they had, they had specific counselors that were just for the athletes. That you would see versus every other student. And I'm sure that's probably at the higher levels, D1 and stuff. And they also came and told you, okay, you're not going to want to take this class at this time because it conflicts with football and stuff like that. That stuff doesn't really exist at D3. Again, much more academic focused. Hopefully teachers are willing to work with you if you have to travel. Not that we have to travel very often, because our conference games are basically within the same state or two. We're not traveling like you did, Scotty, in the Pac-12, where you're going to California and Arizona and whatnot. So kind of lucky in that we don't travel until basically the morning of the game, unless we're going for a non-conference across the country or something like that in weeks 1 or 2. But D3, that's really academically focused. You have a normal advisor, normal counselor, to make sure you get the classes and everything you need. And you'll try your best to structure around football, but again, academics come first. So
you guys got to take a charter bus, Jake?
Yep. Yeah, so if we have, I mean, a lot of our games are, they're within, an hour or so.
Hours.
Especially in our conference here, is the Northwest Conference. We have about 8 teams in the conference, and 4 or 5 of those schools are in Oregon. 3 of those are in Washington. So if you're playing, George Fox in Oregon, so if you're playing an Oregon school, 1:00 game, you'll get up. You'll go have team breakfast real quick, probably like around, or they'll just have a meal prep for you that you bring on the bus with you on your way. Nothing fancy like you guys had or anything like that.
We had our own charter from Alaska so we didn't have no security, or they would do security at the stadium, I think. But yeah, you would fly there, fly back, no tarmac, no waiting. But the one game that we did have to go on the bus was at my senior year against Oregon State, because I guess there was some type of, I don't know, wind or warning or something. So we had to take a charter, and I thought that was the worst experience, because you got guys that are all sweaty and still sweaty after taking showers. You're in a bus for three plus hours from Corvallis back to Seattle. That was just not a good experience for me. But I guess I had it pretty good compared to you guys, huh?
Yeah, no, that's the norm. That's the norm for us. And the only time you're going to be flying for a game or taking that Friday travel trip, if it's, like I said, we played games we played one game pretty much a year. We traveled somewhere, whether it be California, Texas, Tennessee, Wisconsin, those kind of games you travel on that maybe Thursday, probably Thursday, for a Saturday game. But, if we played, from Oregon, we played Whitworth, which is in Spokane, Washington. That's about an 8-9 hour bus ride. We leave that Friday morning and whatnot, but that's it. Otherwise, you're getting up at 6-7 o'clock, getting on the bus, traveling an hour or so for a 1 o'clock, and getting ready for a 1 o'clock game, and then riding the bus back that night after. And that's a typical Saturday game day at this level. And it's just, again, they're only an hour or two away, so we don't have the need for travel days and stuff like that. We're not super spread out as a conference. But I think the other thing too is, like you said, you guys obviously have a lot of money to take those private charters and have those meals and stuff. And obviously we didn't have enough money for that. But I think at George Fox, especially, like I found a lot. The D3s I was at actually had more money in general than the D2s when I was at Central. I mean, our facilities at George Fox were amazing. We had things that you don't often have at lower level programs, like completely outfitted with gear for free. You had a practice helmet and a game helmet, multiple uniforms, elite like facilities that are just tailored to athletics and football. We were in our own section of the entire campus, just football. So we do have those capabilities and stuff. It's not on the grand scale as UW or things that you see at the D1 level, but it's a smaller scale, but we do have those, which is nice. I think something that people overlook.
For sure. Jake, tell the younger audience, because I know right now the swag and the drip and all the gear you get is really important. What's it like? I'll talk about my experience after. What's it like at a D3 when it comes to like cleats and like issued, your jerseys or your team gear? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So for us, again, it's going to depend a little bit on the school. And I'll go through all 3 schools, because as I slowly transferred from one school to the next, it got better, which is ironic, because, being a D2, you think it's high, it's better, it's higher level than D3. You get more. No, we got like a shirt and pair of shorts, like an undershirt, shorts, and a long sleeve, and that's all the gear we got. We got there was one uniform. People that had travel gear at Central at the time, you couldn't keep it. You had to return it at the end of the year, things like that. One helmet, any kind of gloves, cleats, that was all on you. Socks, towel, all that stuff was on you. We got to Lattimore. We got a few more things, little nicer stuff we got to keep. We had multiple shirts, multiple pairs of shorts. We got our own travel gear that we got to keep it each year. But again, still had to provide your own cleats, your gloves, things like that. I got the Fox though, completely outfitted. They provide you cleats. They provide you gloves that, if you tore them, once you tore them, you just go and exchange for another pair. Same with shorts, undershirts, tights, socks, all that was included, all the drip you need. And obviously I bought my own cleats because I wanted to get my own cleats. I wanted to have the the chrome cleats and stuff like that, and whatnot.
Yeah.
So you don't get the selection that you guys probably do, or the specially outfitted ones like you see with Oregon that, they get, for a particular uniform combo, they get a particular set of cleats. It's nothing like that. Like I said, we had a practice helmet and we have a game helmet, which now, fortunately they did the year after I left, but they turned that practice helmet into an alternate helmet. So they have an all white helmet and they have a blue helmet. They can, go back and forth in between the years. So, depends a little bit on the school, but there are those, opportunities to still have completely outfitted, gear. And it's going to be, obviously, I'll let you go into it, but, it's not going to be quite what you had, I'm sure, but it's definitely not too shabby in my opinion, especially for what people expect.
Well, yeah, that's good. Yeah, ours is like, so basically we had the Nike, now they're Adidas at UW, but yeah, it was pretty much, you have one practice helmet, but you have like 5 game helmets that you would probably wear. If you can wear it for that game, you'd wear it that Thursday during the walkthrough, so you kind of feel like acclimated to the helmet, and they would swap it back out. But a guy like myself, again, I was pretty high maintenance, so I had to get the new cleats, new gloves every week. And once you get in with the equipment managers like Bart, who's the OG at Washington, he would get you right. So he would always hook me up with the newest visor, newest cleats, tights, and I had to keep myself clean. And that was one thing I think is pretty unique about the experience. And even like Oregon, for example, like that probably is crazy in terms of the gear they get with like the custom Jordans, like Scott Laigo showed me from his son-in-law. Like they're outfitted with super stuff, but like that's every program at the highest level now has stuff like that. But yeah, it's cool to see that kind of contrasting between the D1, D3 experience when it comes to just the smaller things like that, like the equipment and stuff.
That isn't a small thing anymore. For a lot of kids, that's huge. I mean, it was big for us back in the day, but I think now it's even bigger. You also hit another point, another piece of advice for any athlete, I think, when you're in college. Equipment manager, head equipment manager, and athletic trainers can be your best friends. So you want to make sure you're on their good side. Our athletic trainer, I was lucky enough at Fox when I came in there, befriended him right away. Just happened that way. And one of the new things we got in there was if you guys know the Normatex, those, they're like almost like a game ready. Those big things you put around your legs, and it's like air compression to help with recovery. I was the first one to try him when he got him at our school. He's like, "Hey, do you want to try this?" Because he liked me, he sought me out in particular. So I'm like, "Sure." And for me, it was great because I was done taking ice baths. No longer to have to do that. I could just get one of those and not have to deal with it anymore. So little perks like that, you start befriending those two departments, the heads of those departments right away. It goes a long way. Those are going to be your best friends in athletics.
No ice tubs for me, Jake. This straight hot tub jacuzzi for me, man. I couldn't do the cold baths. They do make it mandatory. Some staff do make it like during camp. You have to. But
we had that too. We had to take. Yeah, we had to alternate between. Yeah, we were in camp. We all, we had like recovery days almost during camp, and part of it was yoga, and then you go from there, and you go with your group. You switch between taking an ice bath, and then you alternate after like 10, 15 minutes, and you go take a cold shower, and then you come back. Right. And so there's definitely all that stuff exists as well, like camp, fall camp, training camp. There's still all the hardships you got to go through. You wake up at 5 or 6, 6 o'clock for breakfast, and then you're not back in your dorm. Make you stay in dorms during camp, especially we did to keep everyone in the same place until 10 o'clock after meeting. So it's nonstop. Whatever level you go to, the intensity in that I don't think is, you still have it's a big time commitment and effort, but yeah. So that's, again, it's interesting to see the contrast a little bit between those levels, but they do exist in some form. Just obviously everything's, vamped up and highlighted at the highest level in D1. So that's kind of my experience though. Like I said, that's what in season was like. That's what my recruiting process was like. Out of season, I didn't touch on it much. Basically the same as yours. You have workouts in the morning, and then you focus on class and have the rest of the day off as well. So, so that's what it's like. Again, D1, D2, D3, the college life of a college football player, given to us by myself, my experiences, and Scotty. But the last bit I want to touch on that we touched at the beginning of the episode, and Scott talked a little bit about at the beginning of the segment was, again, not everyone's going D1. Not everyone has the best resources to figure out and walk through the recruiting process. And so like he alluded to, Scott, founded the Student Athlete Advocates, helping them walk through that process, the academic process, and everything he needed to there. And one of the things we're going to be doing later on is have our own series dedicated to this, in particular with Scott as he walks us through this, a 4 or 5 part series. But Scott, just talk briefly, kind of, let us know what we're going to be going into in that series, and what a little more what Student Athlete Advocates is all about, and what you want to really convey to people in the series coming up, and what to look out for.
Sure. Before I do that, I'm going to age myself with you two. You guys talk about all this drip and all the stuff you get. So in 92 with Coach James, we got a sweatshirt, a pair of socks, a shorts, a t-shirt, and a jock, and a windbreaker in Seattle, Washington. That was what we got. That was it, and we didn't get no more. And our game day pants were the same pants that Coach had in the 1970s. They were expandable and you could, and he would just change the hem on them. So,
oh man,
talk about what you guys get now. It's not even close. It's a different world you guys are living in. Basically, to be honest with you, I started the program. I feel that I noticed, recognize some things. The NCAA trying to make some changes. Started a new program called 2.3 or Take a Knee. You had to have a certain GPA. So we basically help athletes get through the process of the eligibility, recruiting, and financial aid. The 3 parts. The NCAA, if you ever saw 750 pages and take you like years to go through. So we just kind of quickly just get you through the process, explain it to you. To be honest with you, guys are going to Alabama's and all those places we really can't help. It's the other 98% that are going to go to the next level, the next lower things. And that's really where we focus in. It's all, like most people don't know, baseball is only in division 11.7, which I find fascinating. 0.7 of the scholarships that you get in baseball. But if you've ever seen a baseball team at the D1 level, there's 40 guys on the team. So you do the math. How many 40 guys turn into that 11, money? So it's really explaining to parents how this process works. The NCAA is constant change. And now, unfortunately, with the world that we live in, NIL, all these things, that's really changed the landscape. Quick statistic, in the last 2 years on the FBS level, they've got 850 less scholarship high school kids in the last 2 years. So it's a trickle-down effect. So if there's only 850 less, then figure it out. What's that going to do to the next level? It pushes those kids that maybe we're going to go D1. Now they're looking at the D2. The D2 kids get pushed to the D3. I mean, it's a kind of less opportunities. And so, unfortunately, we live in this world of parents think that all their kids are going to be D1 scholarship athletes. And so we kind of help them get through that process and understanding the numbers game. To what you were saying, Jake, earlier, if you're the back and they have a running back room full, they're not going to take a running back. It's as simple as that. Same thing with basketball, whatever. So we just help through the process. We don't get your kid or daughter a scholarship. If you're 4'1", you want to be the center for the UCLA basketball team, that's on you. We'll help you explain how the process. But we can't do those. We can't make the coach, yes, this is the way to do it. We don't work from that model that some of these trainers try to do. So try to do it from the up and up. And there's programs like NCSA. People don't understand. They charge $5,000 for a kid to be in a database, basically. Other answer to that, to really explain the process, understand it. A lot of the stuff you parents can do, and the student athletes, but a lot of times, yeah, you guys, I mean, where you guys are at, I mean, the level is at, for Oregon now and what they're doing down there when it comes to uniforms and all that kind of stuff, swag and all that stuff is really cool, but it's not the most important thing. I always like to use the story just locally here. Southern Oregon won the national championship a couple of years ago at the NAI level. And I'll be perfectly blunt with a lot of parents and students. 20 years from now, when you're sitting in a bar and you're wearing a national championship ring, they don't care if it's from Southern Oregon or if it's the University of Washington, it's a national championship ring, and they're going to ask what the experience was like. And so I just think taking away that misnomer that you have to get to the top of the level is the most important thing, is really the message that we try to, give out to parents and things like that. It's not cheap, as Jake, it's a little bit different. You have to, do a little bit more financial on your end.
Yep.
So that's why we do the financial aid piece. But to be honest with you, we're just we're a platform to help parents navigate it, to get through the understanding of, how, the language and the recruiting process works. When I first got coaching into it, there's only what's called a red shirt, and now there's a gray shirt, a purple shirt, a blue shirt. I mean, the coaches can confuse you in 2 seconds. And as my stepson likes to always say, you're buying carpet from carpetbaggers. They know how to word it right to make you feel like you're getting a scholarship, and then you find out you're a gray shirt and you're really not getting a scholarship. You're really coming back a year later and maybe having a chance. And again, it's just understanding the numbers where we're at, and that's really what we do in our process. So,
No,
I hope
that's
that
awesome.
helps.
Yep. No, I think a resource like that is key, especially with, like you said, the changing world of college athletics right now. And every sport at every level is different, as even Scott and I detailed just with football. But like you said, with baseball and, my sister being in track and field, like learning all this stuff that, there's, not every sport's built the same at the college level in terms of resources and financial stability and whatnot, but also the little things of prepping you and understanding the process of, what is getting ready for the clearinghouse and passing through that, or what it means between a red shirt and a gray shirt and stuff like that. So all those little things, I think what you guys do is awesome in helping people through that process, to be able to understand and really be able to make informed decisions about their future going forward. So thank you, Scott, for that. That's a great intro into what we're going to be talking about in that series upcoming. Again, we're going to dive more into each part of that process. Scott is in the upcoming weeks, and that will be a separate series that we'll put out as well. But be on the lookout for that. That's going to wrap it up for us here today. Hope you guys gained a little more insight into what it's like being a college athlete in football at all different levels, between Scott and myself experiences, but also Scott Laigo as well through his experiences and his viewpoints. Next week, we are going to go into more of the college realm. We're going to obviously, recap the week's news and highlights and stuff, but we're going to focus on, we mentioned a couple weeks ago that the college football playoff here in a few years will be expanded to 12 teams. So we're going to make our own predictions of if it were to happen this year, if it would have been implemented at the end of this year, what would we predict a 12-team playoff would look like? I think we have a good idea in our minds right now, but make predictions right now, and then once we get to the end of the year, see if we would have been right or not based on the final standing. So that's what's coming up for next week. Again, thank you all for being here. Scotty, as always, Scott Laigo, thanks for joining us. A special guest. We'll be talking to you with like I said, our own series coming up. If you guys watching on this, make sure you like, subscribe, make a comment. If you have any questions, reach out to us. Again, follow us on all of our social media. Stay up to date with current news, current things Atavus is doing and helping the game and things coming forward. So that's Atavus at Atavus Football on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all those things. So thank you guys all for being here. Looking forward to our talk next week. Thank you guys, Scott, and we're gonna sign off.